Okay, we are in the middle of studying this song of David's song that he, according to most opinions, he's singing this song at the end of his life, thanking Hashem, sort of like a wrap up of all the rescues, miracles that happened to him over his lifetime. Numerous miracles. We've ourselves have studied his story at length and have covered most of these, if not all of the miracles that have happened to David. And we're up to verse 17. And I made sure to mark down where we're up to. I think in the past I've been
Tetvav is the last one.
Well, I think we started Yud Zayin even. I even started, at least I wrote it down.
You did.
That I started 17, so I made sure to write it down because I think I was going over a few like over reviewing it. So now we're up to verse 17, and we mentioned that the verse says we're in chapter 22, verse 17, and the verse says here, he sent from on high and took me. He drew me out of deep waters. And so what this is, what this means, we translated or interpreted, I should say, one of the meanings of this, that he took me, he drew me out of deep waters. It's talking about miracles that have happened for David being drawn, King David being drawn out of waters, meaning we said that it's either referring to David himself or referring to the Jewish people. And that was what we explained until now about David himself was saved from Saul by the rock. And that was one story, and the other story was in the water when the Egyptians were chasing after the Jewish people. So we mentioned yesterday two interpretations. I don't want to go over it again, but that was yesterday's insight. I want to add that the other point that's brought down, the other interpretation over here is that David was saved from the waters. One of the meanings of this is referring to Lot. Lot was in the story of Genesis, where Lot is
in the cave,
supposed to be he's supposed to be destroyed with the Sodom and Gomorrah people, and instead the angel saves him from from the sulfur and the destruction and the fire, and so Lot's daughter is the grandmother of Ruth, who's the great grandmother of David. So excuse me, Lot's daughter has Moab, and Moab is the grandfather, I should say, of Ruth, and Ruth is the great grandmother of David. So ultimately, it caused David says, "You've saved me from these deep waters." And another interpretation as well is that David is saved because it's referring to David's great-great-grandfather, Nachshon, the son of Aminadav, who was
the first one to jump.
By the splitting of the sea, he jumped into the water, and the water went all the way up to his neck, and he continued continued in the water, and ultimately Hashem saved him and split the sea. Now that act of Mesiras Nefesh, that act of self-sacrifice, was done by Nachshon ben Aminadav, who was the leader of the tribe of Judah, who was basically David's it's David's ancestor, and so
Could you repeat
David,
that? Could you repeat the Hebrew again? The what now?
well, his name is Nachshon, the son of Aminadab. That's just his name. It's a famous name because we know he's the one who jumped into the water.
No, but what about the self-sacrifice? The Hebrew.
So Mesiras Nefesh.
Okay, thank you.
Mesiras Nefesh means giving over one's soul, which is used to refer to self-sacrifice. And he jumped into the water trusting Hashem that this is what we have to do. We have to keep on going. That's what Hashem said. Don't stop, keep on going. And this is, again, the 7th day of Pesach. This story of the splitting of the sea and this Haftorah is read then. And David is saying, thank you to Hashem for drawing me out of the deep waters, meaning not himself, but his great-great-grandfather, Nachshon, his ancestor, who was the first one to jump into the Sea of Reeds and ultimately causing it to split because of his self-sacrifice. But he was on the verge of drowning. I mean, he was all the way up to his neck, and ultimately he was saved. So David is reminding himself and thanking Hashem for this as well. So Yam Sheni Mimayim Rabim. That's the verse 17 that we're reading here, and we're interpreting these two new interpretations that it's referring to these individual salvation of David's ancestors, either Lot or Nachshon. So those are two more interpretations, verse 17. And now we're going to jump to verse 18. And verse 18 is, he saved me from my mighty foe and from my enemies when they overpowered me. Now, here this verse jumps from a singular to the plural, because in the Hebrew, may oivi, my enemy, sounds singular, my mighty foe. And then it jumps misoin I, and it uses the word umtsu. Both of those refer to a plural. So what is the verse referring to? So the beginning part of the verse is talking about one individual enemy, either Goliath or Yishbi Benoiv. Goliath is the story we studied about a while back, where David starts off his position being a man of war with Goliath. Or the story of Yishbi Benoiv is the story we just studied about last week or the week before, and that was this giant that David fought with. So that's the individual enemy. If it's referring to the Jewish people, again, this whole psalm, there's interpretations of it referring to David himself, and there's interpretations of some of it where it's referring to the Jewish people in general. Now, if you want to interpret it to refer to the Jewish people in general, so the individual enemy that it would be referring to here is the way that commentaries explain, is referring to Pharaoh. So either, however you want to learn, it's either Goliath or Yishbi Benoiv, and that would be David's individual enemy, or the Jewish people's enemy would be Pharaoh. And then it jumps to the next half of the verse, from my enemies, that they were very strong, and that's referring to when they overpowered me, umtsumi many, they overpowered me with their strength. That would be referring to the people of Egypt, the Egyptians, if you're referring to the Jewish people. In other words, if we're interpreting it to refer to the Jewish people. And of course, if it's referring to David, it's talking in general, I guess, about his many enemies. Verse 19 then jumps to, they confronted me on the day of my misfortune. And verse, one second. verse 19. They confronted me on the day of my misfortune, but Hashem was a support unto me. And this verse is referring to when was David's day of misfortune that they tried to take advantage. So one of the interpretations is the people of Ziph. Those people, when David was running away from Saul, they tried to take advantage of him. He was the he was in a state of escape where he was the underdog and being sought after by Saul, and they confronted him, referring to the people of Ziph in the day of his misfortune. The other interpretation is referring to they confronted me, or they advanced against me, is referring to Achitophel, when David was being chased after by Avshalom, his own son. So Achitophel, who was the advisor of David for some time, he had chosen to go against David and go with David's son Avshalom, and he tried to take advantage of the situation, confronting David on the day of his misfortune. AD is the day of his misfortune. That's the Hebrew. Vayehi Hashem, and Hashem was a mishonli, was a salvation to me. Now, and what this refers to is, and this is the great story that we learned about, where Hushai gave Avshalom what Avshalom thought was great advice. It was really awful advice, but Hushai purposely gave him this terrible advice because Achitophel almost had everything all set, and David and David would have been killed. And Hushai, who was David's good friend, who was playing a double agent, he gave Avshalom bad advice, and Avshalom listened to Hushai. And the reason he listened to Hushai was because Hashem was a support unto me. That's verse 19. Hashem was a support to me to caused Avshalom to listen to the individual who logically there was no logic in him listening to, because the other person's advice was known to be the best advice possible. Achitophel's advice was considered to be the best advice ever to be had by mankind, and yet Avshalom listened to Hushai. So that would be the other thing, was that Hashem saved David even from the people of Ziph, and that was the story of the angel coming and telling the people of Shaul, that we got to worry about major issues now. Let's let go of David. They had David surrounded, and they said, "No, we got to run back. We have the Plishtim. The Plishtim are fighting us. We better drop everything and run to the Plishtim and save ourselves." So therefore, it's referring to that Hashem was a support unto me, which means that Hashem saved David in the last moment, in the nick of time. Now, the other interpretation, if this is referring to the entire Jewish people, instead of David praising Hashem for his individual salvation, let's say it's referring to the Jewish people. So the commentaries explain that it would refer to the Jewish people being attacked by Amalek. Now it says that they advanced or confronted me on the day of my misfortune. That would refer to what it says in the Talmud, Rafu Yedehem. They weakened their hands from studying Torah. They had gotten mitzvahs in Mara, and they had gotten some of the commandments, and yet they weren't studying them. And because of that, it says Amalek, the Amalekites, this is in Moses' time, the Amalekites started a war against the Jewish people. And the reason they took advantage of the Jewish people was because the Jewish people were weakened at that time, because they weren't really studying Torah, even though they should have. And that is what it means here, that they confronted me on the day of my misfortune. That means that it was a day when the Jewish people were weak. And so Amalek took advantage of the time. Not only did they take advantage of the time, but they took a very strong stand, and a revolutionary stand, because what they did was they started up with the Jewish people when everyone was nervous to start up with the Jews, because we just had great miracles happen for us. And we left Egypt with the plagues and the first biting of the firstborn, and we had everything going our way. All the nations were afraid to start up. And the Amalekites, they took a very arrogant and evil stand by trying to fight us and trying to cool down the awe that all the nations had from the Jewish people. So that's what it refers to here. They confronted me on the day of my misfortune, which refers to Amalek. But Hashem was a support unto me, and that's referring to the story of Moses holding up his hands to heaven. And it says when Moses held up his hands to heaven, caused us to win against the Amalek nation. So we won that war because Moses held, so God miraculously let us win that war. It says Hashem was a support unto me, and that would be referring to that story. So again, we're translating this song to refer to different, it could mean a few different things. It could mean David's individual life, could mean David's ancestors, and it could mean the Jewish people in general. We're trying to give you a general understanding of a few different ways of interpreting each of these verses as explained by the commentaries. Now, verse 20 refers to he brought me out into a broad space. And this is, in the Hebrew, it's called merchav. He brought me out into this broad space, which means that David felt he was in a narrow strait, and Hashem made things broad, which means that not only was David feeling that he was had respite from his challenges, but Hashem made things even better. He turned things around, and by Yotzei Lamerchav, he brought me out into a broad space. He released me, for he desired me. And again, this is we're in verse 20 here, and this refers to the fact that David is being, Hashem is helping him in a way different than the common type of salvation that people get. What does that mean? That often when we are saved from a situation, it costs us from the world to come, because we lose a little portion of our merit, because we used it now instead of having it in the world to come. We use some of our portion up, and we lose some elements of it. But here, at least according to one of the commentaries, this is what it means, that Ki chafetz bi, God desired me. He's not taking away my reward in the world to come, even though Hashem brought me out into this broad space and gave me this salvation, but he did it because he desired me, not because he's taking away from my portion in the world without losing merit from the world to come. Now, the other
Rabbi, you're talking about the afterlife, correct? You're talking about the
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I'm not specifically limiting it to the afterlife. It could also be that, sometimes a person gets some type of a salvation from some problem, but he will get some other type of issue instead. So, in other words, for example, a person might be challenged with a financial issue instead of having a health issue. So a person prays to God and says, God, please save me from this health issue, and God will give him a financial challenge instead of the health issue. So it doesn't necessarily only mean the world to come. It could also mean in this world, but one of the main examples would be in the world to come. Often we lose out something in the world to come. We use the merit from the world to come for some of the blessings, having salvation for certain things if we don't really deserve it. And here David is saying that Hashem, you saved me because you desired me, not because you're causing me to lose something either in the world to come, or as I'm adding, since you asked the question, Susan, as I'm adding to this point, that it's also emphasizing that Hashem desires me, and he's not making me lose something else in this world. I don't have to lose my financial situation in order to get better health or the like, something similar to that. Now, if we want to say this refers to the Jewish people in general and not only David, then the translation would be that he brought me into a broad space. There is a term used when it refers to Torah that Rachava Mine Yam. The Torah is more wide than the entire sea. So that would be Hashem brings me out into the broad space, which means he gives me the Torah, and giving me the Torah to be able to have salvation and to have the blessings that come from the study of Torah and the connecting to Hashem on such a high level, because Torah study is considered one of the highest ways of studying Hashem, of connecting to Hashem. And so it says he brought me out into a broad space. He released me, for he desired me, which basically would refer to the study of Torah, that by studying Torah, we are free from other challenges. Torah is considered like a city of refuge. And so he gave us the Torah, and this is a great gift that we have that saves us from all challenges. Now, it gives us like a comfort or relief and so on. Now, verse 21 is Hashem recompensed me according to my righteousness. He repaid me befitting the cleanliness of my hands. Now, these are a few verses here that seem to be talking about David. It sounds a little arrogant almost, because David is going to use these terms where he says that I have kept the ways of God, I have been clean, my hands are clean, and I have been innocent, and I was vigilant against my sin and my purity before his eyes. So with the devout, you deal devoutly. It sounds like David is sort of acting arrogant in a certain sense. Let's read through these few verses here. Verse 21, Hashem recompensed me according to my righteousness. He repaid me befitting the cleanliness of my hands. Verse 22, for I have kept the ways of Hashem, I have not departed wickedly from my God. For all his judgments are before me. I do not remove myself from his decrees. I have been perfectly innocent with him, and I was vigilant against my sin. Hashem repaid me in accordance with his righteousness, with my righteousness. Look at that, my righteousness, according to my purity before his eyes. And then it continues with the devout, you deal devoutly, and with the one who is strong in his wholeheartedness, you act wholeheartedly. It sounds like David is talking about himself. And with the pure, you act purely. With the corrupt, you act perversely. You save the humble people while your eyes are upon the haughty to lower them. And so what is David really saying over here? So the simple understanding is that acting arrogant and humble doesn't mean that you're supposed to lie. We don't lie about how we're acting. That would not be, that's not humble. It's not humble to say, oh, I've sinned if you didn't sin. That's not what it means to be humble. Humble is after you know your situation and you know if you're righteous or if you've sinned. Humble has to do with the ability that you have. Did you get it? Did you get that ability? Were you given those abilities? Or did you work on them? Did you develop them? Are they from you or are they God-given? In other words, you maybe were given certain talents. You were given the ability. Some people, it's no big deal for them to go on a diet. Other people, it's like, it's impossible. Like they for them to go on a diet, they're really doing a self-sacrifice. Everyone has their challenges. So some people, things have come easy for them. That would be where humility would play a role. Like, is it this? Did I develop? Did I work hard on myself, or was it? And even then, someone else maybe would even do a better job. So that would be where humility kicks in. But knowing what you've done, and if you're righteous or wicked, that's not humility. To be honest with yourself, that's like step number one, is being honest with yourself before you even deal with arrogance or humility. Now, in addition to that, let's look through some of these verses. So verse 21 mentioned that David is talking about his righteousness. What is he referring to when he says, my righteousness? So the righteousness that David is referring to seems to be referring to the fact that he did not take revenge against Saul, that David was careful and controlled himself. Now, if we're talking about the Jewish people, what is the great righteousness that David is referring to, that Hashem gave us reward, Yigmaleni? He did chesed, he did kindness to us according to our righteousness. What is that referring to? So this is a famous verse in the writings or in the prophets, Lechtech acharai bamidbar, that the Jewish people went after Hashem into the desert in a land that is not sown, and we trusted Hashem. You have to understand, I mean, this was a crazy, this was not like in today's day and age where you have rest areas and you can buy whatever you need, and you can always get stuff from Amazon, and there's water wherever you go, and you have water bottles, and you could buy, everything is all set. In those days, imagine going at some rabbi who's 80 years old is telling you that you should walk after him. His name was Moses, and he's going to take us to Israel from Egypt. And to follow this old man, and at that time, and they had no provisions, they had no food, they had no refrigeration, they had no thermoses. There's no water along the way, at least for much of the way. It's desert, and they're following him. So that is the righteousness that it's referring to, that we trusted Hashem, full trust of Hashem. And that's what it says, that Hashem rewarded us according to my righteousness, which is referring to the Jewish people's righteousness, that we followed Hashem after and just trusted him with really blind faith. And now my time is up. I'm going to hand over the mic to Rabbi Werner. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.